What is the creepiest/strangest thing that has happened to you or a friend or family member that creeps you out to this day? Lived in the Hollywood Hills and this happened in the early 80s. Crazy knocking at my door at 9 p.m. I go to answer the door and there's a lady there just hysterical, talking about there's so much blood. She looks normal and is dressed in clean clothing, so we let her in. She tells a story about seeing someone get stabbed. I call the police and 2 uniformed LAPD officers arrive in 10 minutes. They take the lady away and tell us that she was reported missing, has a mental condition, and lives up the street. All good. 30 minutes later, another knock at the door. 2 different cops this time, responding to the call. They have no idea who the other 2 cops were. Take our information and statements, description of the officers and the lady as well. Radio conversations back and forth ensue, and they really don't have any idea how any other cops could have picked her up, because they were given the call 40 minutes ago. Could have been jurisdiction overlap. When I was a kid my parents owned a house right where 3 jurisdictions overlapped, so you could call 911. It was a bad neighborhood, so it happened fairly frequently, and you might get all 3 jurisdictions showing up for the call or none, because they all thought the others would take care of it. I was at a mate's house spending the night when I was in middle school. As expected we'd stay up to all hours, which didn't matter most of the time, except the bathroom was right near his parents' room. About the only time we'd get in trouble was when someone would wake them up when nature called. To avoid this, we'd go out the basement door and just pee in the woods. The door stayed unlocked most of the time, because we'd managed to lock ourselves out more than once. This was also compounded by the fact that we'd all wander out and find something to do in the woods on a regular basis. This night his older brother was home and kept barging in the basement door and raining chaos from above, so we decided to lock the door just to deter him. Not that it really would have kept him out, but at least he'd have to use the key and that took barging in fun out of it. About midnight we heard the handle jiggling and didn't think much of it, figuring it was his brother. After about 5 minutes of off and on handle fondling, my vocabulary has decided to not function at a high level today. We finally hit the door and yelled for him to stop. Quiet. No response. No more clattering of the handle. Great, we can move on, right? Well, about 10 minutes later it started again and the process repeated. This went on for about 2 hours until finally after telling him to stop we just said screw it and ignored it. He continued for about 30 minutes after our last attempt for him to stop and then just gave up. Well, fast forward to about 9 AM. We were just stirring and one of my mates had to go to the bathroom. If you've ever had a sleepover like that, there are bodies strewn wherever there is space and once the first person starts walking around it kind of stirs the nest. We all started stretching and making our way to relieve ourselves of all the soda we'd binged on the night before. As I go walk outside I grab the door handle to close it behind me and noticed it felt rough. After looking at it, I saw that the space around the keyhole was all but destroyed. There were giant scratch marks on every surface and the metal guides were bent and skewed. I asked my friend that lived there what had happened, and he said it was the first he'd noticed it. Not really wanting to get blamed for something his brother did, we went upstairs and told his parents about the night before. After his dad went down to see what we were talking about, he went completely white and ran upstairs to call the cops. Evidently someone had been trying to force the lock open while we were all inside. That's actually happened to me more than once on different occasions. What completely freaks me out about this time was that this person knew we were in there and that we knew someone was trying to get in. Even so he repeatedly tried to force his way inside. God knows what sort of person that was. I had to take care of my mentally handicapped cousin a few years back. She could get around well enough, but due to severe arthritis in her knees and ankles, she had to be watched, helped into the bath, shit like that. I would go into her room in the morning, help her to her walker, so she could piss, and make her breakfast. One morning I heard the water running in the bathroom. When I went to check in on her, I had to pass her room on the way to the bathroom. When I did, I saw that she was in her rocking chair in the corner, her blanket over her head, and she was rocking back and forth. Don't leave the water on, you're going to flood the place. I went into the bathroom to shut the faucet off, and my cousin was there, washing her face. I immediately ran back to the room but it was just her blanket crumbled up in the rocking chair. My cousin wanted to know why I undid her bed. I didn't stay too long after that. My boyfriend works night shift, and I was asleep alone in the house. I get woken up in the middle of the night by my puppy whining in the living room, and I assume it's because he wants outside. I'm just about to open the back door when I hear this weird scratching/clicking sound at the front door, like someone was sticking something in the lock. I go to check, and I can see the silhouette of somebody standing there through the window in the door. I then notice there is a second figure in the living room window, although it's too dark to make out any features. I know they can see me because I didn't have any blinds at this point, and they just stood there. I totally freaked and called the cops, then my dad. I huddled in the kitchen out of sight of any windows and waited for someone to come. My parents live across town and showed up before the cops. They were gone at this point, but the neighbors across the street were up and saw the car. I ended up staying at my parents' place that night, and when I came home the next morning, I noticed the basement window was partially kicked in. I got a security system installed the next day. I still have no idea who it was. I have a story that didn't happen to me, but rather my friend's dad. This guy isn't the type to bullshit, so I believe him 100%. My friend's dad, we'll call him Jack, and his brother, we'll call him Tom, lived with each other in the 80s. It was just the two of them living in the house, no one else. So, this one night Jack is coming home at night and walks into his living room to see a bunch of old people sitting around talking. As he walks in, they all just quiet down and awkwardly look at him as he walks by. He doesn't see Tom anywhere, so he just assumes Tom will be back to tend to his guests. Jack has work the next morning, so he goes in his room to get some sleep, but is kept up from all the people talking. He walks out from his room and is promptly met up with Tom, who is coming out of his room to tell Jack to keep his friends quiet. However, Jack was coming out to tell Tom to keep his friends quiet. They walk out from the hallway into the living room only to see that it's empty with a leftover smell of musk. Oh my freaking god, your story just creeped me the frick out. Listen up, I'll explain why. I live in a completely normal neighborhood. There was a house once for sale a couple of years ago that is about 100 meters away from my house. It was for sale for quite a lot of time, actually, a few months, and it was completely empty. There weren't any curtains or anything, so you could see inside that the house is literally completely empty. No furniture, just white walls, empty rooms. Anyway, here's where it gets creepy. I walked by this house every night at around 10 PM when going home from hanging out with friends or something, and I always looked through the windows to see if someone moved in, but it was always empty and dark. One night, however, there was this one night when I walked by the house and it had lights on. There was furniture, couldn't see much, but there were tables, TV, refrigerator most likely, etc. And there were a bunch of old people sitting around a round table talking and smoking cigarettes. Okay, I didn't find it creepy at all. I just thought to myself, hey, they must have finally sold the house and I haven't noticed it in a few days. They moved in very quickly. But the next day I walked by the house again when it was daylight and it was freaking empty. Again, no furniture, no tables, just white walls and empty rooms, and for sale sign was still freaking there. I still didn't think much about it. To be honest, I didn't even care. I was really weirded out for a bit, but I forgot about it in a few hours. Now here I'm reading your story about your dad's friend and I'm getting chills and creeps because of this one small detail. Old people talking. When I was 7 years old, my mom gave birth to my little sister. Me and my dad went to visit her in the hospital to check out the new family member. As 7-year-olds often do, I got bored, so my parents sent me to the kiosk right outside the main building to get an ice cream. As I was walking towards the kiosk, I cut over the lawn as it was a shorter walk. Suddenly I feel and hear a really heavy thud right behind me. I turn around to see the warped, mangled body of a man in a hospital gown maybe 40 to 50 centimeters from where I was standing. The man had jumped off the hospital roof after receiving news he had terminal cancer. My mom and out of the others in the birth ward even saw the guy flying past the windows. The guy basically just fell short of killing me with him. A group of doctors and psychiatrists asked me to get emergency therapy, but I insisted on getting my ice cream and go home. This day I can still recall the thud of the body hitting the ground and his body lying there next to me, clear as crystal. I still tell this story sometimes, mostly when I'm drunk or high. I don't know why it comes up, but I think shit stuck with me. Edit. Hey guys. Seems like this was a popular story, so I'm going to answer some of your questions. I believe it was a pistachio cone ice cream, which is the freaking best. My parents were very considerate and really wanted me to talk to them or someone about it, but I feel like at the time the concept was too extreme for me to grasp, and it felt scary and unnecessary for me to talk about. I mean, the guy was dead and I'm still alive, so I guess ice cream therapy was the way to go. I have talked to them about it in later years. To the guy doubting the story, my mother was still in the hospital and got told it was a suicide, not an accident, and it was related to the poor guy's bad news. As I explained, I cut over a lawn, so it did not happen directly by the entrance. Believe me, I wish this was not a true story at all. I do not think him traumatized in a way that affects my life. But when you drink and do drugs, stuff comes up and sometimes it feels good just talking about it in a sort of frick yes I'm alive fashion. I'm sorry if my wording and spelling is not top grade, as English is not my first language. Life rules. And I love my family.